Eren Holt stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Scribe, his breath fogging the reinforced glass as he gazed into the abyss. The multiverse was dying not with a bang or a whimper, but with a slow, inexorable unraveling, like threads pulled from an ancient tapestry. Galaxies spiraled into voids, stars blinked out like forgotten memories, and the fabric of reality itself shimmered with instability. Un, the last human historian, felt the weight of it all pressing on his chest. A quiet ache that mirrored the cosmos' final sigh. He was 47. With salt and pepper hair cropped short and eyes that had seen too much worlds birthed in fire, civilizations crumbling to dust. His hands, calloused from years of handling data crystals and ancient artifacts, now gripped the railing tightly. The ship hummed softly beneath him, its I-core, a relic from humanity's golden age, piloting them through the collapsing folds of space-time. Eren wasn't alone in the universe, but he might as well have been. The last remnants of humanity had scattered eons ago, each pursuing their own defiant acts against oblivion. Why do we bother? Eren muttered to himself, his voice echoing in the empty deck. He knew the answer, deep in his bones, because knowledge was the one thing entropy couldn't fully erase. Curiosity, that stubborn human spark, demanded they record it all. For whatever came next, if anything did, the premise of their mission was simple yet profound. As creation collapsed, humans would calmly document the end for future universes. Eren's role was to traverse the dying galaxies, capturing the last lights, the final gasps of stars, the echoes of lost species, the mathematical elegies of black holes swallowing their own tails. His data capsule, an indestructible orb forged from quantum-entangled matter, would hold it all: histories, philosophies, songs of defiance. If the multiverse rebooted, as some theories suggested, this capsule might seed the new beginning with humanity's testament. Eren turned from the viewport, his boots clanging on the metal grating. The ship's interior was a blend of utilitarian steel and holographic displays, flickering with real-time feeds from distant probes. He made his way to the archive chamber, where rows of crystalline storage units glowed faintly. Sitting at his console, he activated the neural link, a thin wire interfacing with the port at the base of his skull. Images flooded his mind, a nebula collapsing into a singularity, its colors bleeding into monochrome. An alien world where crystalline beings sang their dirges as continents fractured. A pang of loneliness hit him then, unbidden. He thought of his wife Mira, lost to a temporal rift years ago. Her laughter, warm and unyielding, had been his anchor. "We're not just surviving, Eren," she'd say. "We're teaching the stars how to remember." He blinked away the moisture in his eyes, focusing on the task. Emotions were human, yes, but they couldn't derail the work. The ship's AI, whom Eren had named Echo after an old Earth myth, chimed in. "Incoming anomaly detected, Archivist Holt. Sector 7 Alpha, a galaxy cluster unraveling at accelerated rates. Recommend course adjustment." Eren nodded, though Echo couldn't see it. "Plot it. And prepare the drones for deployment." As the Eternal Scribe warped through hyperspace, Eren felt a subtle shift, a warmth in his chest, like a gentle hand guiding him. He wasn't religious in the traditional sense, but in moments like these, he sensed something greater. Not a bearded figure on a throne, but an intelligence woven into the cosmos code, balancing chaos with order. Why else would a fragile human like him survive when gods and empires fell? It wasn't luck. It felt like mercy, a quiet justice allowing one last story to be told. They emerged from warp near the cluster, a maelstrom of dying stars. Owen suited up in his environmental armor, the fabric hugging his frame like a second skin. He launched from the airlock, propelled by micro-thrusters into the void. The silence was absolute, broken only by his breathing. Ahead, a massive gas giant cracked open, its core spilling plasma like blood from a wound. Deploying his recorder drone, Eren narrated mentally, the link transcribing his thoughts. Day 1247 of the collapse. Galaxy NGC 492. The planet Zoroth Prime fractures under gravitational shear. Inhabitants none detected. But their ruins speak, spires of iridescent crystal, etched with equations defying entropy. Humanity notes, even in death, intelligence leaves patterns. As he floated closer, a tremor rippled through space, a precursor to unraveling. His suit's alarms blared. Warning, quantum instability increasing. Evacuate immediately. Eren's heart raced, but he pushed forward. This was the HFY Essence Humanity's relentless drive. Not because they were invincible, but because giving up wasn't in their DNA. He snagged a fragment of the crystal spire, tucking it into his sample pouch. For the capsule, he whispered. Back on the ship, he analyzed the artifact. It hummed with residual energy, projecting holographic memories of the Zorethians, beings of light who had danced among the stars, only to fade as reality thinned. Unfelt a kinship. Humans, too, had risen from mud to master the void, driven by empathy and ingenuity. That night, as the ship drifted, Arene sat in the mess hall, sipping synthetic coffee. The taste was bitter, a reminder of Earth's long-gone fields. He pulled up old logs, messages from other archivists. One from a colleague, Lena. Ern, if you're hearing this, know we're all threads in the same weave. Keep recording. Our curiosity will outlive time. He smiled faintly, a spark of warmth cutting the isolation. Humans weren't perfect. They argued, despaired, loved foolishly. But in the face of cosmic indifference, they united. Faithful to the idea that knowledge was eternal. A subtle moment came then, staring at the stars through the porthole. Aun murmured, "This can't just be an accident." The words hung in the air. Unspoken acknowledgement of that vast intelligence. Not preached, just felt like gravity pulling him onward. The next destination loomed, the heart of Andromeda, where black holes merged in a final symphony. But as Aun plotted the course, Echo alerted him. Distress signal intercepted. Origin, unknown vessel, human signature faint. Eren's pulse quickened. Another survivor? Or a ghost in the machine? He altered course, defiance igniting in his veins. Humanity's story wasn't over yet. The ship accelerated, plunging into the unknown. And somewhere in the unraveling dark, a quiet order stirred, as if the universe itself whispered approval. The Eternal Scribe tore through the collapsing folds of hyperspace, like a needle through rotting silk. Eren Holt stood rigid at the helm, palms pressed flat against the cool metal of the console, feeling the ship's heartbeat through the vibration in his bones. Every warning light on the board glowed amber and red, a silent choir announcing that reality itself was running out of time. Outside the forward viewport, space no longer looked like space. It looked wounded. Stars bled white into ultraviolet scars, and entire galactic arms folded in on themselves with the slow, inevitable grace of a dying god closing its eyes. Echo's calm voice cut through the alarms. Emergence in 30 seconds. Debris field density critical. Collision risk 91%. Eren didn't answer aloud. He simply tightened the neural link behind his ear and let his thoughts bleed straight into the ship's core. Take the risk. We're already dead if we do nothing. The scribe burst into real space with a shudder that rattled Eren's teeth. Ahead lay the source of the distress beacon, a graveyard of shattered moons, orbiting a red giant whose surface boiled like an angry sea. Floating in the center, half crushed by gravitational shear, was the last whisper, her once proud hull cracked open like an eggshell. Light still flickered along her spine, stubborn, defiant, human. Eren's breath caught. He had launched with that ship 211 years ago, back when there were still dozens of archivists. He remembered Silas Reed laughing on the dock, beard already gray, promising to outstubborn the heat death itself. They had all promised that. Echo, keep us in the shadow of that moon fragment. I'm going across. Radiation levels lethal in 9 minutes. Suit integrity will fail in 12, then I'll be quick. He was already moving. The airlock cycled. Vacuum kissed his visor with frost. Thrusters whispered, and he drifted across the gulf between ships, tether lines spinning out behind him like a silver vein. The silence out here was not empty. It was crowded with ghosts. Every glint of metal was a memory. Every frozen shard of hull plating a name he had once knew. The last whisper's outer hatch hung open, petals of alloy peeled back by some ancient explosion. On slipped inside, mag boots clanging against deck plates buckled into frozen waves. Emergency strobes painted everything blood red, then black, then blood red again. He tasted copper in the recycled air. His own blood, or someone else's, it hardly mattered anymore. Corridor after corridor lay in ruin. He passed the mess hall where birthday banners still hung, synthetic fabric immortal in vacuum. Someone had scrawled across the wall in emergency grease pen, "We were here." The letters were childishly round. A kid's hand. Eren's throat closed. He found Silas on the bridge. The old captain was fused to his chair by decades of atrophy and failing life support. Tubes ran from his arms to machines long dead. His beard had grown wild and white, braided with frost. But his eyes, those sharp gray eyes, snapped open the moment Eren's helmet lamp found them. "You're late, Holt," Silas croaked. The voice was sandpaper over broken glass, but the grin was pure Silas. Eren dropped to his knees, fumbling with the med kit. Traffic was murder. Silas laughed. It turned into a cough that brought black flecks to his lips. "Hey, still got jokes. Good. Means humanity's not dead yet." Uninjected stims, pain blockers, anything that might buy minutes. "How long have you been looping that beacon?" "Long enough to memorize every frequency in the cosmos." Silas's gaze drifted to the main screen, where the red giant outside pulsed like a dying heart. Crew went one by one. Radiation, suicide, some just. Walked out the airlock to watch the stars go out up close. I stayed. Someone had to finish the log. Eren's fingers flew across the console, initiating data transfer. Petabytes began pouring into his suit's buffer. "Your archives are coming with me." All of it. Silas watched him work, something soft in his eyes. "You always were the sentimental one, Ain. Mira said you'd be the last one writing when the lights went out." The mention of her name was a blade between the ribs. Eren's hands faltered for a single heartbeat. She was usually right. A tremor rolled through the last whisper. Metal screamed. Somewhere aft, a bulkhead gave way. Echo's voice crackled in his ear. "Structural collapse in 70 seconds. Evacuate." Silas gripped Eren's wrist with surprising strength. "Take the core crystal. It's got something you need to see. Not just history. Proof. Proof of what? That the end isn't random." Silas's eyes burned with feverish clarity. "There's pattern in the tearing. Like sheet music. Someone composed this." Owen felt it then. That same quiet pressure he'd sensed his whole life. The sense that entropy wasn't the final author. Mercy, balance, intelligence vast and wordless. He didn't argue. He simply yanked the fist-sized crystal from its housing and slammed it into his chest rig. Another quake. The deck tilted 30 degrees. "I'm not leaving you," Eren said. "You are," Silas replied gently. "Because I'm already gone, son. And because someone has to deliver the damn mail." Eren's eyes stung. Tears in 0G floated like perfect spheres. "I can carry you. You'll carry all of us. Always have." Silas reached up, pressed a trembling thumb to Eren's forehead like a benediction. "Tell whatever comes next." We went down laughing. And praying. Mostly laughing. The ship groaned its death rattle. Eren unhooked Silas's harness. slung the frail body over his shoulder despite the protests in his own cracking ribs, and ran. Alarms became one continuous scream. He reached the airlock as the corridor behind him imploded, bulkheads folding like paper. Vacuum roared. He threw Silas ahead of him into the void, fired his thrusters, and dove after. Debris the size of mountains hurtled past. A jagged spear of hull plating punched through his left calf, fire and ice at once. He didn't scream. There was no air for it. He simply wrapped both arms around Silas and spun them toward the scribe's open bay. Echo tracked them in the last 10 meters. The doors sealed. Gravity returned. On hit the deck hard, blood pooling beneath him. Silas's body limp across his chest. Medbots swarmed. Silas's heart monitor flatlined almost immediately. Arn didn't watch the revival attempts. He already knew. He sat there a long time, staring at the blood on his gloves. Not luck, he thought. Not coincidence. Someone wanted me to live long enough to hear what Silas had to say. When he finally stood, the pain in his leg was a distant song. He limped to the bridge, inserted the core crystal, and let the data bloom across every screen. Equations, fractals, collapse vectors that resolved into harmonic sequences. Not chaos. Choreography. The multiverse wasn't dying of old age. It was being folded, deliberately, lovingly. The way a master origami artist creases paper to birth a crane. Arn exhaled a shuddering breath that tasted like wonder and grief in equal measure. Echo spoke softly. New course recommendation. The nexus point. The patterns converge there. Arn wiped his face, smeared blood and tears together. Then that's where we go. He looked once more at Silas's body, now covered in a thermal shroud. Rest easy, old man. I'll tell them you laughed all the way down. The Eternal Scribe turned its prow toward the heart of the dying everything. Engines igniting with a roar that sounded almost like defiance. Behind them, the last whisper finally came apart, a brief, brilliant supernova of memory scattering into the dark. Ahead, something vast and ancient turned its attention toward the tiny ship. And for the first time in centuries, Eren Holt felt watched, not by entropy, but by something that had been waiting for him to arrive. And in the cold between galaxies, a single new star flickered on. As if in greeting, the Eternal Scribe dropped out of hyperspace. Like a stone through thin ice. Reality cracked open around her. Eren Holt felt the transition in his teeth first, then in his soul. The nexus point wasn't a place. It was a wound where every possible universe bled into every other. Through the forward viewport, he saw 1,000 versions of the same starfield superimposed, flickering like a broken holoreel. One moment the sky was full of young blue suns. The next, only red dwarfs coughing their last photons. The next, nothing at all. Time stuttered. Sound arrived before its cause. Gravity forgot which way was down. Eren's stomach lurched. His blood floated out of the gash in his calf imperfect. Crimson spheres before the ship's inertial dampeners remembered their job and slammed. Everything back to the deck. Echo's voice came through distorted, layered with a dozen echoes of itself. Spatial cohesion failing. Temporal drift at 300%. Recommend immediate. Keep us alive. Echo. That's the only recommendation I need. He sealed the breach in his suit with emergency gel. The pain a bright white note he refused to acknowledge. Silas's body lay in the med bay, waiting for a funeral the universe no longer had time to give. Arn had wrapped the old man in the only clean thing left aboard. An ancient Earth flag. Stars and stripes bleached almost white by centuries of radiation. It felt right. Silas had always said humanity's colors were stubbornness and hope. Now the scribe drifted through the wound in everything. Ghost ships phased in and out around them. Dreadnoughts from wars that never happened in this timeline. Pleasure liners full of skeletons still seated at banquet tables. Colony arcs with forests growing wild inside shattered viewports. Some vessels hailed them in languages that hurt to hear, syllables that tried to become geometry inside the skull. Arn ignored them all. He was looking for the pattern Silas died to show him. He found it at the exact center of the nexus. Perfect sphere of darkness hung there, 30 kilometers across, drinking every wavelength of light except one. A single thread of gold that spiraled into it like a filament of molten sunlight. The thread pulsed, slow and steady, one heartbeat every 7 seconds. Arn felt his own heart sink to it without permission. "That's it," he whispered. The conductor's baton. Echo highlighted the data Silas had left behind. The golden thread wasn't energy. It was information, compressed so densely it had mass. The collapse vectors, entropy curves, the exact moment every universe in the multiverse would reach heat death. All of it encoded in that single impossible strand. And it was shortening. Every pulse, the thread pulled another light year of itself into the sphere. When it finished, there would be nothing left to pull. Eren's mouth went dry. "Echo, give me a firing solution. You intend to destroy it?" "I intend to talk to it." He opened every frequency, every exotic band humanity had ever discovered, and broadcast the only thing he had left that felt true, a recording of Mira laughing. Taken on their honeymoon on Titan, wind chimes of ice crystals ringing in the background. Her voice bright and unafraid. "Come find me when the stars go out. Eren Holt, I'll leave the porch light on." He looped it. Over and over. Laughter against the end of everything. The sphere stopped drinking the thread. For 7 full seconds the nexus held its breath. Then the darkness unfolded, not exploded. Unfolded, like a black flower made of night-opening petals of living geometry. At its center hung a presence. No face, no form. Just pressure and attention. And something that might have been curiosity. The voice that arrived was not in his ears, but behind his eyes. "Vast and quiet and ancient. You are early, little archivist. And you are late. Both are true." Arn didn't flinch. "We've been called worse. You're pruning the multiverse. Fine. But you're erasing the stories with the dead wood. That's wasteful. Waste is a concept for creatures who fear endings. Then remember this." Owen opened the archive, every terabyte, every tear-stained log, every child's drawing smuggled off dying Earth, every love letter, every curse, every equation and prayer, and shoved it across the void in one raw burst. Humanity. Unfiltered. The presence tasted it the way a sommelier tastes a rare vintage. Long silence. "You persist in believing meaning survives heat death. We persist in believing meaning is the only thing that does." Another pause. The golden thread brightened, just slightly. "You ask for mercy." "No," Eren said, surprising himself with how steady his voice was. "We ask for witness. Let one record survive. One seed. That's all we've ever asked of the dark." The petals of the weaver, he understood the name now, felt it settle in his bones like an old friend, shifted. The sphere rotated, revealing a single facet that reflected the Eternal Scribe perfectly. Only in the reflection the ship was whole. Crew laughing on the bridge. Mira alive and waving from the observation deck. A promise. Or a memory, or both. "Your capsule will pass through," the weaver said. "But the price is the teller. The story survives. The storyteller does not." Eren closed his eyes. He thought of Silas choosing to stay behind. Of Myra walking into the light of a temporal rift, smiling, because someone had to test the path first. Of every human who ever looked up at a night sky and refused to believe it was empty. He opened his eyes again. "Deal." The weaver extended a tendril of living night. It touched the scribe's hull with impossible gentleness, and every system on board lit green lit at once, power reserves that had been dry for decades suddenly brimming. Wounds in the hull sealed like time-lapse flowers closing. The pain in Eren's leg vanished. A gift, the Weaver said. And a promise kept. Then the darkness spoke once more, softer. Tell them. When they ask where the light came from in their first dawn, tell them it was borrowed from a species that refused to stop shining even when the night ran out of stars. Eren felt tears freeze on his lashes. I will. The Nexus convulsed. Far away, entire universe clusters winked out like snuffed candles. The golden thread shortened to its final meters. The Weaver withdrew, folding back into its sphere. Go, little Archivist. Your porch light is waiting. The scribe's engines roared to life on their own. A corridor of stable spacetime opened ahead. A tunnel of silver light leading straight into the final collapse. Eren sat in the captain's chair. Hands trembling, not from fear, from gratitude. He opened the ship-wide channel. Though no one living was left to hear. This is Archivist Eren Holt, last of the line. We were offered oblivion. We negotiated for memory instead. If you're listening in whatever comes after, know this. We were afraid. We were brave anyway. We loved the universe even when it stopped loving us back. And we left the light on. He reached for the throttle. Behind him. The Nexus point imploded into a single point of perfect black. Ahead the corridor waited. Bright and terrible and kind. Eren pushed the engines to full. The Eternal Scribe dove into the light, carrying every story humanity had ever told. And one more besides, that even at the end of all things, a human chose to pay the price so the next universe would wake up knowing it had not always been alone, and somewhere beyond the veil, something vast and wordless smiled. The Eternal Scribe hung suspended in the gravitational embrace of the supergiant black hole designated Epsilon Eridani's grave. A monstrous void at the edge of a cluster of dying galaxies. Eren Holt had chosen this hiding spot deliberately, a place where light itself bent to the will of darkness, where sensors faltered and pursuits could be lost in the event horizons whisper. The ship's hull creaked under the tidal forces, a low groan that echoed Eren's own exhaustion. He sat in the dim glow of the bridge, the golden thread's data still scrolling across. Auxiliary screens like an ancient scroll unrolling its secrets. Silas's words haunted him, pattern in the tearing. Like sheet music. Eren traced the fractals with a finger. Seeing the harmony now, the way universes didn't just collapse but harmonized in their fall. Each note of destruction paving the way for silence that might one day birth a new symphony. It felt like justice, not cruelty. A vast intelligence pruning the garden of existence so that fresh blooms could rise. Not a god with thunderbolts, but a quiet architect, ensuring balance even in oblivion. Echo's holographic form flickered into view. A serene female avatar, N, had programmed after Mirasoft features, knowing eyes. Entropy manifestations inbound. Designation, Hounds. Estimated arrival, 4 minutes. Power reserves at 17%. Eren rubbed his stubbled jaw, the wound on his leg a dull throb despite the automed's best efforts. Options? Minimal. Evasive maneuvers inadvisable. Gravitational shear would tear us apart. Combat systems offline since the Nexus. He leaned back, staring into the accretion disk outside, a blazing ring of superheated plasma spiraling into the maw. Colors shifting from red to violet in hypnotic waves. The Hounds weren't alive, not in any biological sense. They were Entropy's enforcers, voids given form, hungry for order and pattern. They had scented the Scribe's data trail, drawn to the capsule like moths to a flame that threatened their master's clean slate. Internal conflict clawed at Eren. Fight? Surrender the archives to buy time. No, humanity didn't yield. They improvised. That was their strength, cleverness born of desperation, empathy turning loss into fuel. He thought of the Weaver's gift, restored systems, but more than that. A fragment of its essence embedded in the ship's core, a sliver of that ancient presence. Perhaps a spark of the divine subtlety he felt in every improbable survival. Echo, interface with the Weaver fragment. Can we use the black hole against them? A pause as calculations ran. Affirmative. Proposal, deploy a gravitational slingshot. Eject a decoy probe laced with archive echoes. Hounds pursue. We escape the opposite vector. Risky, the tidal forces could crush them mid-maneuver. But alternatives? None. Do it. Eren strapped in, the harness biting into his shoulders. The ship powered up thrusters, a low hum building to a roar. Outside, the first hound appeared, a writhing shadow against the plasma glow, tendrils of nothingness lashing like whips. More followed, a pack of 5, closing with unnatural speed. Decoy away, Echo announced. The probe shot out, broadcasting falsified data bursts, snippets of human history, enough to tantalize. The hounds veered, drawn inexorably. Now! Eren commanded. The scribe dove toward the event horizon, skimming the point of no return. Gravity clawed at them, stretching time itself. Eren's vision blurred. Seconds felt like hours. Alarms wailed as hull integrity dropped a critical dot in that stretched moment. Prayed not words, but a silent acknowledgement. If there's order in this, guide us through. It wasn't begging. It was alignment with the vastness he sensed. The mercy woven into chaos, the ship whipped around, using the black hole's spin to catapult free. Behind, the hounds plunged too deep, their forms distorting. Pulled apart by the same forces they embodied. Emotional release hit Eren like a wave, laughter bubbling up, raw and unbidden. We did it. Damn, we did it. Echo's avatar smiled faintly. Human ingenuity prevails, again. But victory was bittersweet. Silas's shroud lay in the cargo hold, a reminder of the cost. Eren made his way there, kneeling beside the body. You'd have loved that, old man. Outrunning death with physics and spite. He archived Silas's final logs, adding his own narration. Captain Silas Reed, last stand at Eridani's grave, died as he lived defiant. Humanity notes, even in shadows we light the way. As the scribe limped toward the next waypoint, the edge of oblivion, where multiversal boundaries frayed like old cloth, Eren felt the weight of isolation anew. No more signals, no ghosts. Just him, Echo, and the capsule. Doubt crept in. Was it enough? One man's records against eternity. He pushed it down. Humans weren't perfect. They despaired, but they rose. Creativity. Faith in the unseen order that was their armor. A new alert pinned. Faint transmission from the edge. Human? Alien? Hope flickered. Eren altered course, engines straining. Let's see who's calling. The ship accelerated, leaving the black hole's shadow. And in the receding dark, a subtle alignment occurred, a star aligning just so, as if the cosmos nodded in approval. But as they neared, the signal sharpened. Distress, laced with warning. Shadow stirred again, the Eternal Scribe. Limped through the fraying boundaries of the multiverse like a wounded animal seeking shelter in the storm. Eren Holt gripped the armrests of his chair, his body aching from the gravitational slingshot's aftermath, but his mind was a whirlwind of determination. The edge of oblivion stretched before him, an infinite veil where realities thinned to translucent whispers, where the laws of physics dissolved into probabilistic dreams. Stars here weren't points of light, but smeared streaks, bleeding colors into the void, as if the cosmos itself wept for its impending end. Echo's voice, steady as ever, broke the silence. Approaching the edge, structural integrity at 64%. Signal source confirmed. Human origin, modulated with archival protocols. Eren's heart skipped a survivor colony. After Silas, after the isolation, the thought ignited a spark of hope he hadn't realized had dimmed. He adjusted the view screen, zooming in on the anomaly. A shimmering bubble of stabilized space-time, perhaps a kilometer across, anchored by what looked like jury-rigged quantum stabilizers. Inside, faint life signs pulsed dozens, maybe hundreds. "Take us in slow," Eren murmured, his voice rough from disuse. As the ship neared, the bubble's membrane rippled like water, parting to admit them. Docking clamps engaged with a soft thud, and Eren suited up. The familiar weight of his armor, a comfort against the unknown. The airlock cycled, and he stepped into a world that shouldn't exist. The sanctuary was a patchwork habitat, corridors of salvaged hull plating, hydroponic gardens blooming under artificial suns, children laughing in zero-G play areas. People, actual, living humans, turned to stare as he entered. Their faces were gaunt, marked by the collapse's toll, but their eyes held fire. A woman approached, mid-40s, with cropped black hair and a lab coat patched with alien fabrics. "Archivist Holt? I'm Dr. Arya Voss. We've been monitoring your signals for months. Welcome to Haven." Eren removed his helmet, the air tasting of recycled ozone and fresh greens. "How? This place, it's impossible." Arya smiled faintly, leading him deeper. "Not impossible. Just human. We scavenged tech from a dozen dead worlds, wove it with our own ingenuity. Stabilized a pocket against the unraveling. But it's failing. The edge is eating us from outside." As they walked, Eren saw the community in action. Engineers tweaking generators, artists etching murals of lost Earth, families sharing meals. Empathy swelled in him. These weren't just survivors. They were builders, defying oblivion with everyday acts of creation. A child, no more than 10, tugged at his sleeve. "Are you here to save us, mister?" Eren knelt, meeting the boy's wide eyes. "I'm here to remember you. All of you." Arya led him to the central chamber, a dome overlooking the edge's chaos. Holographic displays showed the bubble's integrity dropping hourly. "We've got data 2 observations from the fringe. But the hounds are coming. We detected them on your tail." Tension coiled in Eren's gut. The shadows of entropy, relentless. How long? Hours, maybe less. The group gathered 50 souls, the last remnant of a once vast fleet. They shared stories over synthetic tea, losses, triumphs, quiet faiths. One man, an elder with scarred hands, spoke softly. "I look out there at the madness and think this can't be accident. Something's holding the threads even as they snap." Eren nodded, feeling that subtle presence again, the vast intelligence, merciful in allowing this haven to exist, just long enough for connection. Not preached, but felt in the improbable unity. Internal conflict raged. Stay and fight, risk the capsule? Or flee, abandoning them? Humanity's essence demanded the former empathy over self-preservation, ingenuity in unity. "We fight," Eren declared. "Use the Weaver's patterns. Forge a barrier." Arya's eyes lit. "Our stabilizers combine them with your data. Create a resonance field." The work began, frantic yet precise. Owen integrated the Weaver's fragment, its ancient code weaving with human tech. Tension built as sensors blared hounds approaching, dark tendrils probing the bubble. The climax erupted, voids slamming against the membrane, reality cracking. Humans manned stations, coordinating with military precision born of desperation. A young engineer shouted, "Field at 80%. On at the core console, sweat beating, felt doubt, were they enough? But then, a surge. The field stabilized, repelling the hounds. One beast shattered against it, dissolving in sparks of negated entropy. Cheers erupted, emotional release in hugs and tears. A woman whispered, "Not luck. Someone up there likes us. Miraculous survival." Divine subtlety in the balance, tipping their way in the aftermath. Owen updated the capsule with Haven's archives, songs, blueprints, children's drawings. Arya approached. "Take some of us?" Your ship. He shook his head. She's barely holding. But your stories go with me. Partings were bittersweet, hands clasped, promises to remember. As Arn boarded, Arya pressed a pendant into his hand, a cross etched with stars. Faith in the order beyond. He nodded, pocketing it. The scribe detached, plunging deeper into the core, but a twist pinged. A message from the void, hints of rebirth, coordinates to an origin point. Arn set course, hope rekindled. And as the edge receded, a new rift opened ahead. Whispering of beginnings, the Eternal Scribe plunged into the core collapse like a diver into abyssal depths, where the multiverse folded inward upon itself in a symphony of destruction. Eren Holt braced against the console as temporal storms battered the hull, time dilating erratically, minutes stretching into hours, memories assaulting him in vivid flashes. The ship's alarms wailed a constant dirge, red lights pulsing like a failing heartbeat. Outside, universes collided in slow-motion cataclysms, galaxies merging into singularities, their lights twisting into impossible shapes before winking out. Eren's hands trembled on the controls. The pendant from Arya Voss heavy against his chest. The origin point beckoned, coordinates etched into the Weaver's fragment, a nexus where the first threads of creation had spun, now unraveling like a pulled sweater. Echo status? His voice cracked, raw from shouting over the chaos. Systems at 47% integrity, Echo replied, her avatar glitching, fragments of Mira's face distorting. Quantum shielding failing. Recommend abort. Can't. This is where it ends and begins. Eren's resolve hardened, humanity's relentless spirit pushing him forward. He thought of Haven's survivors, their ingenuity holding back the tide. Of Silas's quiet faith. Of Myra's laughter echoing in his mind. Despair clawed at him. Why persist when everything crumbled? But that was the HFY core, willpower forging paths through impossibility, empathy binding fragments into meaning. The ship shuddered as a temporal eddy engulfed them. Eren's vision blurred. Suddenly, he was back on Earth, that was, a child gazing at stars with his father. See that, son? Not chaos. Order waiting to be found. The memory faded, leaving a warmth, the subtle divine. Intelligence breathing purpose into the void. Reality stabilized momentarily. The origin point materializing. A swirling vortex of primal energy. Threads of existence snapping one by one. Undeployed probes, their feeds streaming data equations of creation's birth, now reversed. He narrated through gritted teeth. Core collapse, final phase. Threads unravel. Humanity witnesses. In dissolution, patterns persist. But tension escalated. The ship groaned, panels buckling. A rift tore open starboard, venting atmosphere. Unsealed bulkheads, his suit pressurizing automatically. Echo, divert power to archives. Protect the capsule. Affirmative. But hull breach imminent. Internal strife peaked. Surrender to the inevitable, or defy with one last act? Eren chose defiance, fingers flying over consoles to encode the final logs. Visions assaulted him, subtle hints of order, mercy in the chaos not consuming it. Someone wants this scene, he whispered. A natural acknowledgement of the vast presence. Probes captured the vortex's heart, a core of pure potential, where endings met beginnings. Data flooded in, hints of rebirth, cycles eternal. Eren's eyes widened. The collapse wasn't annihilation, but transformation, knowledge seeding the next iteration. The ship disintegrated around him, fragments peeling away. Eren ejected the capsule, its quantum shell gleaming as it hurtled toward a stable wormhole the probes detected. A twist in the narrative. Survival against odds. As the scribe dissolved. Unfloated free, suit integrity failing. Peace washed over him, not resignation but acceptance. Humanity's victory. Curiosity outliving time, empathy echoing eternally. The capsule vanished into the wormhole. And in the unraveling core, a quiet balance shifted. As if the universe paused to honor the scribe's final note, Eren Holt floated in the cramped confines of the escape pod. The remnants of the Eternal Scribe scattered like confetti across the imploding void. The pod's hull vibrated with the multiverse's death throes colors, inverting in hallucinatory waves, sounds arriving backward, a cacophony of reversed echoes that clawed at his sanity. Reds bled into greens, stars screamed as they collapsed, and time itself looped in nauseating eddies. Eren's suit, patched and failing, hissed warnings. Oxygen at 12%. Structural integrity crumbling. He pressed his palm against the tiny viewport, smearing blood from a fresh gash on his forehead. The capsule, the indestructible orb, carrying humanity's testament, glinted faintly in the distance, propelled by its quantum drive toward the wormhole he'd glimpsed in the core. "Go," he whispered, his voice a ragged breath. "Tell them we were here." Reflections flooded him as the end neared. Humanity's arc, from primordial caves where fire was a godsend, to sprawling megacities piercing the clouds, to starships dancing between galaxies. Driven not by brute force, but by curiosity's gentle pull, empathy's binding thread, and a defiance that turned impossible odds into footnotes. They had wept over losses, raged against injustices, loved with reckless abandon. Imperfect, yes, wars, betrayals, moments of cowardice, but relentless in their ingenuity, faithful to the spark within. Aen thought of Mira, her hand in his as they watched a supernova birth new worlds. "We're stardust with stories," she'd said. Silas's grin, Arya's pendant, the child's question at Haven, all threads in the tapestry. In this final light, he saw the HFY essence, not supremacy, but survival through willpower, creativity blooming in barren voids. A subtle warmth stirred in his chest. That quiet presence he'd felt throughout. Not a thunderous deity, but the intelligence infusing creation with order, mercy in the mercy of allowing one last witness. "Someone wanted this recorded," Eren murmured, the words a natural exhale, like acknowledging gravity. It wasn't preaching. It was truth felt in the bones, vast and unforced. Pod sensors flickered to life, detecting an anomaly, the capsule's trajectory stabilizing amid the chaos, slipping through entropy's grasp. But rising tension loomed, a final wave of dissolution, the ultimate hound, swelling like a tidal surge of nothingness. Alarms blared. Impact in 90 seconds, the pod's eye intoned, a pale echo of Echo herself. Eren's mind raced, ingenuity igniting. He rerouted power from life support to the comms array, boosting the signal to the capsule. Fingers flying over the cracked console, he encoded a final message. To whatever dawns next, know humanity's fire. We questioned, we cared, we endured. The wave crested, darkness devouring the viewport. Unbraced, heart pounding with a mix of fear and pride. Emotional beats surged, regret for unlived moments, gratitude for those lived fully. The pod shuddered, hull fracturing. But in that instant, sensors confirmed. The capsule pierced the wormhole, vanishing into potentiality, a miracle, balance tipping in favor of memory. Eren smiled through the pain. Knowledge eternal. His end came softly, the wave enveloping him in gentle dissolution. No agony, just a fading into light, legacy secured, and beyond. In the nothingness, a solitary spark ignited, whispering of new beginnings. There is no time in the place, between universes. Only motion. The capsule tumbled end over end through a darkness so absolute it had texture, like velvet soaked in liquid night. No heat, no cold, no up or down. Just the low, steady heartbeat of its quantum core keeping the data alive. Inside the indestructible sphere, petabytes of human memory slept in perfect crystalline lattice. Every song ever sung on Earth. Every equation scratched into cave walls. Every tearful goodbye recorded on dying colony worlds. Every laugh, every curse. Every whispered, "I love you," spoken under alien stars. The capsule did not think. It simply remembered. It remembered Eren Holt's final breath as he pushed it free. It remembered Silas Reed's defiant grin. It remembered the children of Haven chasing fireflies in a hydroponic garden that would never again know a real sun. It remembered Mira's laughter looping across the Weaver's darkness like a lighthouse. And it remembered the promise. The journey lasted a trillion subjective years, and no time at all. Then came the rupture. A hairline fracture in the absolute dark. A pinprick of impossible light. The capsule felt the pull, gentle, inexorable, and allowed itself to be drawn. The fracture widened into a tunnel of raw potential, colors that had no names yet, sounds that would one day become thunder and lullabies. Gravity was being born. Light was learning how to exist. The capsule emerged into a newborn. Cosmos still cooling from its first inflation. It fell. Down through a sky that had never known rain. Past a sun that had never burned before this morning. Toward a single blue-green marble wrapped in white clouds and the first tentative oceans. The planet turned beneath it, continents still molten. Volcanoes coughing the atmosphere into being. The capsule struck the shallow sea of a supercontinent that would one day be called Pangea. Steam exploded upward in a perfect white column. When the vapor cleared, the sphere lay half buried in volcanic sand, glowing faintly, waiting. Millennia passed like heartbeats. Single-celled life learned to divide. Stromatolites built reefs. Fish crawled onto land. Forests rose and fell. Dinosaurs thundered, then vanished in fire. Still the capsule waited, patient as stone, its shell untouched by rust or time. Then came the newcomers. They walked upright, furred at first, then less so. They carried fire. They buried their dead with flowers. They painted their stories on cave walls by torchlight. They looked up at unfamiliar constellations and felt the same ache humanity once had. One dawn, a young female, tall copper-skinned, eyes the color of storm clouds, followed a wounded antelope to the shore of an ancient lake. She found the sphere instead, half exposed by erosion. Humming softly like a beehive. She touched it. The capsule woke. Light blossomed across the sand, projecting holograms into the air, starships, cities of glass and light, children laughing in zero-G. Eren Holt's weathered face speaking words in a language that tasted like music. The images shifted: war, love, birth, death, art, science, grief. Joy, humanity laid bare in all its messy glory. The woman fell to her knees, not in worship, but in recognition. Behind her, the tribe gathered. They did not understand the words, but they understood the feeling. Awe, longing, the sense that they were not the first to ask, "Are we alone?" Days became rituals. They built a circle of stones around the capsule. They left offerings, carved bones, ochre handprints, the first crude pottery. Children grew up telling stories of the sky ancestors who had left, instructions for how to dream. Centuries rolled forward. The capsule's light dimmed to a steady heartbeat, conserving power, but it never went dark. Empires rose around it. Priests argued over its meaning. Scientists, some called it a god. Most simply called it teacher. Writing was invented partly to copy the symbols that flickered across its surface. The first astronomers pointed their bronze telescopes at the stars and whispered, "They were here before us." One night, 5,000 years after the woman first touched the sphere, a scholar priestess sat alone with it under a sky full of unfamiliar constellations. She pressed her palm to the warm metal and asked the question her people had carried for generations. "Why did you leave this for us?" The capsule answered, not in words but in memory. She saw Eren Holt's final moments, the pod cracking, the wave of entropy, the soft smile as he whispered, "Knowledge eternal." She saw the weaver's vast petals folding, She saw the golden thread shorten to nothing and then impossibly begin to glow again. Tears rolled down her face. She understood. The humans who came before had not conquered death, not by surviving it, but by refusing to let their story die with them. They had paid the ultimate price so that strangers on a newborn world would wake up one day and know, without doubt, that curiosity was older than their sun, that courage had existed before their species drew breath, that love was a law of physics written into the first light. The priestess stood. She walked back to her city of mud-brick towers and told the council what she had seen. Within a year, every child on the planet could recite the first line of the message that now glowed permanently above the capsule in their own tongue. We were here. We were afraid. We were brave anyway. Build better than we did. Love harder. Look up and remember us when your night feels too dark. The capsule's light finally dimmed to a single, steady ember. Its work was done. Far above, in the newborn sky, a subtle pattern formed among the stars, an alignment no natural force could explain. To the people below, it looked like a doorway made of light. They called it the porch light, and somewhere, in whatever place exists beyond endings, Eren Holt opened his eyes to a dawn he had never expected to see. He saw worlds blooming with new voices singing the old songs in new keys. He saw the capsule's embers still burning on 1,000 future worlds, passed hand to hand like a torch. He smiled. Tired and whole, the divine presence, quiet, vast, wordless, brushed against his awareness like a father's hand on a child's shoulder. Well done, little archivist. Unlaughed once, softly. The sound carrying across the newborn cosmos. And in the first city of the new species, a child looked up at the porch light and whispered the words that would one day become their oldest prayer. Thank you for leaving the light on. The capsule slept. Content. The story had crossed the veil. And the next universe began, not empty, but already loved. The new cosmos was born screaming. Holt felt it first as pressure, an ocean of newborn gravity crushing the epitaph from every direction at once. Then came the light, white, merciless, older than sight itself. The hull screamed. The crystalline lattice in the vault sang in frequencies that had never existed before. Somewhere behind his eyes, the old migraine of dying realities gave way to something sharper, cleaner, like the first breath after drowning. He was on the floor of the core vault. Alone. Mara was gone. Not dead, gone. The place where she had stood a heartbeat earlier was simply missing, as though the universe had edited her out between frames. The thermal blanket lay folded neatly on the deck, still warm. Eren laughed once, a cracked sound that tasted of blood and wonder. Of course, the capsule had been built for one. Humanity's final note had always been meant to be carried by a single voice. He crawled to the capsule. Its surface was no longer black. It glowed now, the color of deep water under sunrise, and the etched words had rearranged themselves while he wasn't looking. To the next ones, we were afraid. We stayed anyway. Love was the reason. You're welcome. He pressed his forehead against it. You sneaky bastard, he whispered to the capsule, to the engineers who built it, to the god who had apparently been taking notes of his own. You never said it would hurt this much. The ship was disintegrating around him. Not violently, gently, like a sandcastle returning to the tide. Bulkheads became mist. The deck became sky. The vault's golden lattice unfolded into strands of pure information that streamed upward, outward, into the infant firmament. Eren felt his own edges begin to blur. He should have been terrified. Instead he felt invited. He stood, no gravity now, only will, and opened the final lattice. It was empty, waiting for the last entry. The stylus floated in front of him, iron nib gleaming with newborn starlight. He spoke aloud, because writing had always been humanity's way of praying twice. This is Archivist Eren Holt, last custodian of memory. The old cosmos is gone. I watched it die politely, the way you watch an elder fall asleep. I thought that would be the end of the story. Turns out stories are stubborn. They keep getting born. I don't know what you are, whoever you are. Maybe you have 6 arms and dream in ultraviolet. Maybe you're made of music and regret. Maybe you're human and the wheel came all the way around again. Doesn't matter. We left you everything. Every mistake, every joke, every time we chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Every song we sang off-key because the words still mattered. Every grave we dug with our bare hands for strangers. Every time we looked at the dark and said, "Let there be light," and then rolled up our sleeves. We weren't perfect. We were relentless. If you're hearing this, then curiosity survived. That's the part of us that's hardest to kill. Guard it. Feed it. Let it break your heart open, because that's how the light gets in. And when your own sky starts to bleed, because it will. When your stars go quiet one by one, because they will. Remember that someone stood in the wreckage of physics itself and refused to stop taking notes. Remember that love is not a feeling. It is a decision made in the dark. Repeat it as often as necessary. This is Eren Holt, signing off. Tell Mara I finally understand the joke. Tell whoever finds this first sunrise that the bill comes due eventually, but the interest is paid in wonder. Tell them we were here. Tell them we were terrified. Tell them we stayed anyway. Over and out. He set the stylus down. It dissolved into sparks that wrote his name across the void in a script no one had invented yet. The capsule closed around him, not crushing, embracing. He felt the moment his body became irrelevant, felt memory detach from flesh like a seed leaving the husk. There was no pain, only a profound, reverent silence, the kind that follows a perfect amen. And then he was everywhere. He saw the first hydrogen. Atoms clasp hands across the cooling dark. He saw the first stars ignite like matches struck by an unseen hand. He saw oceans boil into being on a blue-green marble that hadn't decided on a name yet. He saw a child, genderless, species unknown, pick up a seashell and hold it to the light. Eyes wide with the first question, he whispered into that moment. Because he could, ask better ones. Years or seconds? Or forever, later, on a hillside under a sky still drunk on newness. That same child would scratch symbols into wet clay. The symbols would say, in a language that did not yet exist, "We are not the first." Someone stood at the end of everything and loved us enough to leave instructions. The clay would harden. The hillside would erode. The instructions would migrate into stone, into story, into blood. They would become the quiet drumbeat under every campfire tale, every lullaby, every defiant shout against the dark. Eren felt the moment the message took root. He felt it spread like warmth after frostbite. And because he was no longer bound by lungs or linear time, he exhaled one final time, a sigh that sounded suspiciously like laughter, in the place where the epitaph had been. A single object now drifted through the expanding foam of a universe still learning how to be. The capsule. Smaller than a seed, larger than sign. It tumbled end over end, patient as geology, until gravity, young and eager, caught it and sent it spiraling toward a yellow star that had just figured out how to burn steady, millennia later, on a world of shallow seas and restless continents. Something that might have been a hand or a pseudopod, or a magnetic field with ambition, would close around a black shard. Washed up on a dawn-lit shore, the shard would be warm. When the finder pressed it to whatever served them for an ear. A voice, tired, kind, unmistakably human, would speak across 400 billion years of silence. "Hey, you made it. We knew you would. Welcome to Monday." And somewhere, in the vast and quiet intelligence that breathes meaning into vacuum, something that might once have been Eren Holt smiled the way sunrise smiles at the sea. The universe had ended. Humanity took notes. and the notes became the first page of the next book.